The federal patrol truck sat silent beside a dry creek bed, its front tires sinking slightly into a layer of sand and gravel. The driver's door hung ajar, the seat still bearing the faint impression of someone who had just been there. On the passenger seat, the radio was switched on, spitting out nothing but static. No voice on the other end. In the back, a neatly folded Ranger jacket lay untouched. The keys were still in the ignition. Headlights flickered weakly, fading. A chill wind swept through the canyon, carrying the scent of pine resin and cold water. But there were no footprints around the vehicle, no calls for help. Only an eerie emptiness where Park Ranger Jonathan Miles should have been. Investigators later confirmed that he had sent an urgent message about a rotting wooden bridge in the Keatong northern mountains. Yet that report vanished from the system just minutes after it was sent. And then, months later, something strange surfaced more than 40 miles from the scene, setting off a chain of cryptic clues that would turn this disappearance into one of the most enduring mysteries in the history of Sierra Verde. Jonathan Miles grew up in a quiet neighborhood in Keatong, Savannah, Georgia, where towering oak trees draped their moss-covered branches over the sidewalks, and summer afternoons often carried the faint scent of salt water, drifting in from the distant coast. His father was a dedicated ship repairman, spending his life working in the boatyards along the river. His mother was a nurse at the local community clinic. Jonathan's childhood was filled with fishing trips, alongside his father, who taught him how to read the water's surface, watch the wind, and look for signs. From seabirds to predict the weather. From those moments, he learned that even the smallest details could hold valuable information if you knew how to interpret them. After graduating high school, Jonathan chose to enlist in the military. Years of service in some of the harshest terrains, from dense jungles to scorching deserts, sharpened his ability to remain calm under pressure and heightened his awareness of even the slightest changes in his surroundings. When his service ended, he didn't return to city life. Instead, he decided to pursue conservation work, a way to protect something greater than himself, while reclaiming the sense of peace the military had taken from him. Joining the Park Ranger force, Jonathan quickly became one of Sierra Verde's most trusted rangers. He knew every trail, creek, and species in the park, and he was on a first-name basis with most of the locals. People knew him as the kind of person who would stop mid-patrol to help a family change a tire or guide a lost group of hikers back to safety. Though serious about his duties, he carried a gentle sense of humor that lightened tense situations. His colleagues described him as someone who always follows protocol, but never forgets he's working with people. Among his habits, one stood out. Jonathan always carried a brown leather notebook. The cover was worn from years of use, its pages slightly curled from being hastily stuffed into his jacket pocket. Inside were neatly written entries, sometimes just a few keywords, other times detailed observations of Pasachicetas, unusual events, a strange boot print near the eastern trail, an unmarked car parked at the park's edge, or odd noises drifting from the north close to midnight. He called the notebook his second set of eyes, believing that human memory could be influenced, but pen and paper preserved the truth. Just weeks before his disappearance during an internal meeting, he had joked, "If one day you see me without my notebook, it means I'm not me anymore." Back then, everyone laughed it off. But later, those words would haunt the people searching for him. That notebook was never found, and its absence suggested that something had been wrong from the very start. Photography was another of Jonathan's quiet passions. He preferred an old film camera, a gift from his father, over modern digital models. He liked to capture morning light filtering through the trees or dew clinging to a spider's web. Most of his photos stayed tucked away in a wooden box in his small home, but occasionally he would send a print to someone he had once helped, a way of keeping in touch. Jonathan was also an exceptional listener. When someone spoke to him, he never interrupted, never rushed to offer advice, but gave his full attention, making people feel genuinely heard. Many younger rangers turned to him for guidance, both in the field and in personal matters. He often reminded them that being a park ranger wasn't just about patrols and enforcement. It was about safeguarding the safety and experience of every single Sierra Verde person who entered the park. In Sierra Verde, a place where rugged terrain and unpredictable weather could change in a matter of hours, Jonathan's presence offered reassurance to both visitors and locals. That's why, when word spread that he had gone missing, the shock and unease rippled far beyond the ranger station, leaving a void in the community that no one has been able to fill. On the afternoon of September 3rd, 2021, Jonathan was assigned to investigate an urgent report about a rotting wooden bridge in the northern mountains of Sierra Verde. This was a remote area, narrow, steep trails flanked by old pine forests and sheer rock cliffs. The bridge report had been sent through the Rangers' internal communication channel and marked priority, meaning anyone who received it was required to respond immediately. Jonathan left the main station at around 3:30 p.m., driving his familiar green SUV. He carried his backpack, flashlight, drinking water, and his brown leather notebook. GPS data from the vehicle showed that he followed the designated route, stopping briefly at a secondary lookout station to check his map before continuing north. At about 5:12 p.m., the last location ping placed him near Coyote Run, a seasonal creek that, during dry months, is little more than a bed of exposed stones. This was also where his patrol vehicle would later be found. When colleagues arrived around 6:00 p.m., the scene left them unsettled. The driver's door was slightly open, the keys still in the ignition, headlights on. The radio set on the passenger seat, but unused. A neatly folded ranger jacket lay on the back seat. Unusual, since Jonathan typically wore it outdoors, especially as the evening chill began setting in. There were no signs of a struggle and no clear footprints around the vehicle, only a few pine needles, caught on the gear shift as if someone had entered and left quickly. His notebook was nowhere in sight, immediately raising alarms. That same night, a search team was assembled, experienced rangers and local volunteers familiar with the terrain. They combed a 5-kilometer radius around the vehicle, checking every trail and rock crevice. Even with search dogs, progress was slow. The hard, dry ground left no tracks, and strong winds erased any scent. Then a strange detail emerged. About 800 meters from the vehicle, under a low bush, they found a silver fountain pen engraved with the initials JM. The pen was still filled with ink, but its barrel was coated in a layer of red dust, the kind of soil that not found in Coyote Run, but common in Lost Canyon, roughly 30 kilometers to the south. No one could explain why it was here. If Jonathan had been to Lost Canyon, there was no record of it in his patrol logs. Some began to suspect the pen had been moved, deliberately placed to mislead the search. The search perimeter was expanded to 20 kilometers, with drones scanning the area, but no other sign of Jonathan surfaced in the days that followed. Meanwhile, investigators re-examined the bridge report. The internal communication log showed that the message appeared at about 2:55 p.m. that day and vanished from the server just 10 minutes later with no backup. Copy. This was highly unusual since all urgent reports were automatically archived for at least 6 months. Tracing the source of the message led to no registered device or account. This pointed to a troubling possibility. The alert may have been fake, sent from a device outside the official system. That finding made the original theory that Jonathan had suffered an accident while inspecting the bridge far less plausible. Questions began to surface. If it was a trap, who set it and why? As more days passed without new leads, what had started as a routine patrol assignment had escalated into a full-scale missing persons investigation, drawing in federal authorities as well as locals who had known and trusted Jonathan for years. In the weeks following Jonathan's disappearance, investigators focused on uncovering any link between the false bridge report and his absence. A team of veteran rangers was tasked with sweeping every trail and remote stretch of Sierra Verde, hoping to find indirect clues, a personal item, traces of a campfire, or anything suggesting he had passed through. Sierra Verde's terrain offers no easy concessions. Its deep valleys and jagged mountain ridges can hide evidence for years. Investigators paid particular attention to Lost Canyon, the only place with the same reddish soil found on Tassat, Jonathan's silver pen. Reaching it requires navigating steep inclines and loose rock, a trip Jonathan would never have taken, alone, without a compelling reason. Yet no direct evidence placed him there on the day he vanished. Instead, searchers found a fresh set of off-road tires, tracks at the canyon's edge, tread patterns belonging to no park ranger vehicle. The tracks led outward, but their origin was deep, inside the canyon, hinting that someone, possibly more than one person, had been using the area as a hideout or staging point, and that Jonathan's pen may have been dropped there in the process. While search teams scoured the field, investigators analyzed Jonathan's communication logs and patrol reports from the previous 6 months. They noticed several brief entries in the notebooks he submitted periodically, observations absent from his official reports. Gray pickup near East Trail, no driver in sight. Unusual light on South Ridge at 11 p.m. On their own, these incidents could have been nothing. But when connected, they revealed a pattern of unusual movement inside the park, potentially linked to activity beyond the ranger's oversight. A close colleague recalled that just weeks before he disappeared, Jonathan had remarked, "There's something out here that doesn't belong," but refused to elaborate. Investigators began to suspect he might have stumbled upon illegal activity, and that on September 3rd, the fake bridge alert had lured him toward it. Then, a breakthrough. A resident living south of the park came forward, reporting that on the afternoon Jonathan vanished, they saw a dark-colored SUV exiting a service road normally kept locked. The gate's keys are held only by park rangers and a few authorized contractors, yet no maintenance had been scheduled there that day. The witness couldn't see the license plate clearly, but remembered the vehicle had a sealed cargo box in the back and that someone appeared to be sitting inside. Though not enough to identify the vehicle or its driver, the account strengthened the theory that Jonathan's disappearance was no accident. It prompted investigators to focus on who had authorized access to the service area that day and whether that SUV was tied to the false bridge report. The timing, the location, and the fact that Jonathan was working nearby were too coincidental to ignore, narrowing the pool of possible suspects and opening a new, more focused line of inquiry. Nearly a year after Jonathan's disappearance, on a warm summer morning, a group of community volunteers surveying the southern edge of Sierra Verde stumbled upon something unusual. Hanging neatly from a pine branch about 3 meters above the ground was a dark brown ranger hat, the same standard issue style Jonathan wore on patrol. It was intact, not badly faded, but the inside brim was coated with a fine layer of dust and a few dry pine needles, suggesting it had been outdoors for some time, yet shielded from direct rain. At the base of the tree, wedged between 2 flat stones, the volunteers found half of a torn topographic map. The remaining portion revealed a faint red pencil marking a small trail not listed on any official park documents. When the evidence was brought to investigators, they noticed the marked trail led toward an area rumored to be a drop site for smuggled goods, though this had never been proven. The appearance of Jonathan's hat here sparked new questions. Had he left it himself, or had someone placed it deliberately as a message? After studying the fragment, investigators quietly followed the trail indicated on the map. It wound through rugged terrain, crossing a dry creek, bed and squeezing between narrow rock passes. After about 2 hours of hiking, the team reached a flat clearing surrounded by natural rock walls. There were signs of stacked stones arranged in a half moon, a common windbreak method for temporary camps. Scattered paper scraps lay nearby, their writing faded by sun and moisture. Most striking was a length of dark green nylon cord, snagged on a low branch. This cord matched the same deep green thread later, found in Jonathan's leather notebook, recovered months earlier when a local stumbled upon it inside an abandoned storage shed. The connection between these two pieces of evidence couldn't yet be explained, but together they began to form a faint outline of the larger mystery. The trail itself showed no signs of recent use, but its secluded location reinforced the suspicion that it had once been a hidden staging point for moving something or someone. Soon after, another local came forward carrying Jonathan's brown leather notebook. They claimed to have found it while cleaning out their family's old storage shed. The notebook was in good condition, its pages intact, but the final entry was hastily scrawled, "Dry Bridge, tonight," followed by a symbol of 3 parallel lines. The exact internal warning code used by only a handful of rangers to signal human-caused danger. The ink was clear, yet there were no fingerprints on the paper or cover, as though it had been carefully wiped clean. Tucked between the back cover and the inner lining was a strand of dark green cord, identical to the nylon, caught on the branch near the marked trail. This discovery raised the unsettling possibility that Jonathan had recorded his final message on the night he disappeared, and that somehow the notebook had been removed from the scene and ended up in someone else's possession. But the central question remained unanswered. Worked out was about sex. These clues, Jonathan's deliberate attempt to leave a trail for help, or had someone arranged them all to mislead those searching for him? By the fall of the second year after Jonathan's disappearance, the official investigation had nearly ground to a halt. The files grew thicker, but answers remained out of reach. At that point, a small team of investigators decided to revisit overlooked areas, working from the theory that someone had deliberately moved evidence to throw off the original search. They began with the park's internal service roads, gated routes accessible only to authorized personnel. One western spur led them to a little visited area with an abandoned storage shed, once used to house construction materials during checkpoint upgrades. The building had been sealed for years, but its old lock had clearly been replaced recently. Inside, the space was empty, except for faint off-road, tire tracks pressed into the sandy floor, and a streak of reddish dust leading from one corner to the rear. Exit. This same soil matched the sample found on Jonathan's silver fountain pen. The discovery suggested the site may have been used as a transfer or holding point tied to the disappearance, possibly a link between Lost Canyon and other locations within the park. Meanwhile, a separate team combed through all ranger patrol reports filed in the 3 months before and after Jonathan went missing. They paid close attention to records that lacked detail or described activity outside normal assignments. In doing so, they found a troubling overlap. Another ranger had filed a report noting bridge maintenance activity on the very day Jonathan vanished in an area roughly 15 kilometers from where his vehicle was found. The report had no photo evidence, no accompanying work log, and, when cross-referenced with schedules, note, authorized maintenance planned for that date. Questioned about it, the ranger claimed it was a clerical error, but could not recall details of the trip. The explanation didn't break protocol outright, but it left an unsettling gap, especially given that the fake bridge report was what had lured Jonathan to a remote location in the first place. Investigators couldn't prove a direct connection, but it was enough to keep this anomaly on their watch list. Then, in November, a powerful storm swept through Sierra Verde, causing landslides that exposed terrain, long hidden under soil and rock. In the aftermath, a park staff member surveying damage found a length of dark green nylon cord snagged in tree roots at the edge of a natural sinkhole. About 3 meters down, resting in the debris, was a moss green hiking backpack designed for long trips. It was caked in mud, but still zipped shut. Inside were a half-empty water bottle with its cap, removed, a small flashlight with dead batteries, and a large panoramic map of Sierra Verde. On the map, both Lost Canyon and the park's southern boundary were circled in pencil, alongside the same 3 parallel lines found in Jonathan's notebook. There was no ID or definitive proof the backpack belonged to him, but the repeating symbol convinced investigators it was part of the same chain of messages, either left by Jonathan or planted by someone to steer the narrative. Yet the discovery brought them no closer to a clear answer. Each new clue seemed to fit into the puzzle, but the larger picture remained hidden. And the question loomed larger than ever. Were these breadcrumbs truly guiding them toward the truth, or leading them in an endless loop of carefully crafted false signals designed to keep Jonathan's disappearance unsolved forever? 2 years after Jonathan vanished, Sierra Verde still stood as grand and serene as ever, its mountain slopes draped in old pines. But for those who knew him, every trail and every creek seemed to be missing something. The official investigation remained open, meaning the case could be reactivated the moment a new lead surfaced. The collected evidence, the silver pen dusted in red soil, the ranger hat hanging from a pine branch, the worn leather notebook with its strange symbol, the buried backpack, all sat behind glass at the main ranger station. Visitors often paused to read the brief descriptions, studying these ordinary-looking items before walking away in silence, carrying their own unspoken questions. Jonathan's family, though accustomed to the emptiness, still organized an annual memorial hike. They chose a high overlook above the valley where the setting sun bathed the forest in gold and released slips of paper with written messages into the wind. His younger sister once shared that for them, the most important thing wasn't getting answers right away. It was knowing Jonathan hadn't been forgotten, that his story was still told with respect and compassion. In town, his name still came up in quiet conversations. At the cafe or the corner store, the community's way of keeping him alive in their shared memory. For those who had followed the case from the beginning, Jonathan's disappearance was more than a mystery. It was a reminder that even the strongest and most experienced among us can vanish in a place we think we know. Perhaps he witnessed something no one was meant to see. Perhaps he found himself in a situation with no way back. Or perhaps what we know is only a fragment of a much larger story. Whatever the truth, the scattered clues left behind are like puzzle pieces that will never complete the picture, making every theory both plausible and fragile. And maybe that fragility is what makes this case resonate, because it forces us to wonder what might remain if one day we were the ones to disappear. Thank you for taking the time to follow Jonathan Miles's story and for keeping his memory alive. If you believe the truth about his disappearance deserves to be known, share this video so the story can reach more people. And if you, too, carry an unanswered question in your heart, leave a message or simply write, "So do I." Because sometimes just knowing someone else is searching alongside you can be its own kind of comfort.